Yo, the Dohrok here, and today I want to show you guys how I farmed out my plus 25 weapon, how you can easily farm your plus 25 weapon, show you guys how to make the most efficient use of your time to make the most gold possible, so that you can get your plus 25 weapon super fast. You won't even believe how fast it is. It's a joke. So let's start this by going back 9 months ago when Smilegate announced Tier 4 was going to be coming out. So at the time, I had 13 different classes on my roster. Outside of my top 6, I liked having additional classes that I could play so that I could do teaching runs with. I could do community runs over at twitchtv.com/DJ Dohrok to help people out where people are having a hard time finding other groups. And turns out that was a terrible mistake, because Smilegate said Tier 4 is coming, and Tier 4 is coming with a soft reset, where it only is going to be expanding on the systems that currently exist. Woo! Very obviously, these new additions in Tier 4 were going to be very expensive early on, and since 2 of the largest investment systems in the game were now getting new additions to them, you already know those were going to be expensive as fudge. Or eggs. So I made the first logical decision, knowing that I needed to farm more gold. I made a second account, and I filled all of my extra time with more grinding. I did have 2 goals. I obviously wanted to generate extra income since I could finish all the raids on my main account relatively fast. But I also wanted to see what was the brand new player experience like in Lost Ark 2 years after release. Because I think it's easy to remember what it was like when I was playing when Global came out, but, you know, I didn't really know exactly what was the best and most efficient path for brand new players to be taking. So I wanted to experience that, and so I wanted to make a whole video on that later on. But I'll go into more detail about that a little bit later in the video. Now, it's going to take a while to actually build up a second account to where it's going to be usable to be farming you any kind of like efficient amount of gold, because the tricky part about it is that you're going to be investing into each character that you build up, and then they have to make that gold back before, you know, you're back positive again. So all of my characters that I made, I knew that I needed to make them with events. They all had to be power passed characters, except for the one, like, fresh one that was going to be kind of like forced into not using a pass. So I didn't have 6 characters on a second account for the past 9 months. But over the past 9 months, I have been building up a full roster. But at the same time, I also was consolidating down my main roster into 4 Deathblades, a Glaver, and a Paladin. And on the second account, I only made Deathblades. So between the 2 accounts, we had 10 Deathblades, a Glaver, and a Paladin. And with these 2 accounts, I farmed for months. Every single day, ran dailies on my main 6. However many Deathblades that I had on my second account made at the time, I was running all of their dailies. Ran every raid, ran every cube. Everything was funneled onto my main character, on my main Deathblade. While my alts, they were just building up piles and piles of bound bats along the way. But that still wasn't enough to get my plus 25. At least not in a reasonable amount of time frame for me personally. So I needed to double that amount of income. And how do I double it? Buses. That's right. All of those teaching runs, all the community runs I did, just canceled. Because call me Miss Frizzle, I hopped on the Magic Money bus and I started printing more gold than I could count. And like this, I went into full saving mode for weeks, and I finally started honing my plus 25. And then this happened. Man, I need to get lucky on this tab, dude. This game... You owe me this home. After what you did to me on 24, you owe me this home. So back to farming I went. And after a few more weeks of non-stop raiding, dailies, all of the cubes, all of my life energy, any amount of extra gold that I could possibly generate, I was able to start my honing adventure yet again. And then this happened. Crafting cost for 30 taps is 179,000. So we go. If it taps in like one tap, I would be so fucking... Okay, it didn't. Okay, if it pities, then I'll be sad. Because I don't have enough to pity it. Oh, I don't like this, dude. %70%. Oh, it hurts. Maybe Vern will bring some luck. Damn. So I went back to farming a third time. This time, we only had to farm for about 3 more weeks. And then finally, after all of this time, something truly amazing happened. It's like 8 months of farming with a second account. 2 sidereal energy drops. Multiple accessories that I've sold for hundreds of thousands of gold. A very small amount, as in 1 relic Hitmaster book. Let's go. It didn't even automatically change the glow. Didn't even automatically change the glow. Jesus. And yep. After over 6 million gold invested, I one-tapped it. This was 100% absolutely worth it. You could do it too if you just make a second account, do dailies on 12 characters every day, bus every raid that you possibly can, double dip every Chaos Gate and Field Boss, run every cube that you find, funnel all of the mats that you get into this one single hone, and after you do all of that, it should only take you about 2 months of farming. Or you could take the alternative approach. Personally, this is one of the dumbest grinds I've ever done in any MMORPG, and that's competing with me grinding up rank 12 on Classic WoW. This really highlights some of the major issues that exist in the game, and there's a lot of controversy around certain ways this game is played in order to achieve things like this. Mainly, it's going to be buses, RMT, alt accounts, and how expensive everything is. Personally, I don't really think there's anything wrong with busing. I do, however, agree with the point that it's a bad experience for new players or returning players to try and go find a group and they open up Party Finder and there's 9 buses and only 1 normal run. That's not the greatest experience, and I agree with that 100%. And I think that same sentiment is shared among the community, which has led to the recent banning of advertising buses and Party Finder. I think that some people hoped that this would help fix a problem that it definitely wasn't going to fix, which is how buses contribute to the overall inflation and the markets. Busing wasn't banned, it was just moved from Party Finder to Discord. And like I said, I don't have an issue with busing, but it does beg the question of asking, why are there this many people busing? There is an obvious want to earn more gold to be able to afford the items to progress in the game. You need materials, relic books, gems. It's all super expensive, and people feel like they need to farm more gold, and the most efficient way to do that is by running a bus. And sure, some people have stopped busing because they're too lazy to do it in Discord instead. And I would say that the overall impact on the economy has not had any real impact at all. However, the people that were busing that are now too lazy to bus in Discord are just heavily gatekeeping their raids. It's not like they're running with people that they weren't used to running with already. And some people may be quick to say, well, that's just because RMT is actually the problem, it's not busing. Which, obviously RMT is a problem. You could do this 2 years ago and see evidence of RMT in game, and you still can do this now. In fact, it almost seems like AGS is kind of in support of it by making a stance to possibly only give you a 3-day ban or just take away the gold. But if you spend it all before they do that, then you get to keep all of your stuff. You're just negative gold. Which I personally find more annoying than anything, because I just spent 2 months farming every day on 2 accounts, basically 70 hours a week of Lost Ark to get the same shit that someone else swiped off G2G and maybe took a 3-day ban for. And at the same time, I've had numerous people tell me that they won't accept characters on my second account into raids because they just don't support alt accounts. And I've seen this sentiment online on Reddit and in some discords, and I can understand this somewhat. Some people have alt accounts where they just make a bunch of 1640s, they take a bus and they earn a few thousand gold from that raid while they're AFK instead of actually doing it, and it seems like it's just kind of like a free money glitch. And I'm sure some people are suspecting of Chaos Dungeon bots. That's probably another thing too, that there's a lot of people that are just using a Chaos Dungeon bot so that they can use these extra accounts to farm dailies every single day. Personally, I run all of my raids and all of my characters, they're max transcendence, they all have 40 set elixir, they're all death blades, so I use the same gems on all of them. And I know many other people that play alt accounts that are in the same position, they just do it so that they can do some more stuff. And to me, it's weird to have a dislike for someone who is just simply playing the game a lot more so that they can earn more stuff, when in fact you actually just don't like people that are getting free gold by taking buses with minimal effort. And I'm sure it can be said I have a bit of a bias towards second accounts because I have one, but the reality is like, would you personally do all of that extra farming that I did if you had a second account? It's completely degenerate. It's not cheating, but it is completely degenerate. And that's not to take away from people that are legitimately cheating with alt accounts. If you are cheating with an alt account, then you should be banned, and AGS needs to be more proactive at banning these people that are using third-party programs to play the game for them. That should go without saying. Which I have to say that all of this is fueled by the singular fact that everything is just too damn expensive. People aren't running buses because they're trying to farm for a retirement. People are running buses because they're trying to afford to hone their alts, and they're trying to get gems and buy relic books and get new accessories and all this crap that came with tier 4. Not to mention the insane hike on crafting cost per honing chance, and then advanced honing. The Lost Ark economy isn't immune to supply and demand. Using relic books as an example, relic books are in demand because so little people have them right now, and people are going to need them for a long time. However, relic books are barely hitting the markets, constantly keeping the price really high because players are still very in demand of these books. It's a big hit of copium to think that there will be a sudden decrease in inflation that will drive prices down on these books by stopping busing or people having alt accounts. There's a thought that if people have less gold, then they can't afford the price, so the price has to come down to where people can afford it again. But people can't afford books now, and prices are going up. The supply of books has to increase to see a decrease in value, or there has to be a demand decrease as people obtain more and more of them. This is also true with gems. Gems have gone up pretty drastically since the start of tier 4 because people start buying higher level gems later into the game. There are some days I will have multiple 1670 characters that get one single level 1 tier 4 gem from Curzan. It takes 729 level 1 gems to make a level 7. And I think it's 19,683 level 1 gems for a level 10. Given the fact that there's only this many people playing on global, it's no wonder that there's only this many level 10 gems on the market right now. And I'm trying to approach this from every perspective being presented. A lot of people that I talk to in my community on twitch.tv/DJ Dohrok, definitely where you should come and check out all the best Deathblade gameplay, are not sitting around grinding every day for 8 hours to keep up with the current content. And I consider a lot of these players the most important players that Lost Ark has. These are the average player, the casual players. There's a big issue that exists for these players just getting to tier 4 to begin with. In a lot of cases, to get a character from 1600 to 1620 is costing 300 to 400k just in crafting cost without an event. And if you're a person that still has characters in tier 3 that you're trying to bring up to tier 4, it's safe to assume that your weekly gold income is less than 300k while you're doing everything that you can to get gold. Bear in mind, pretty much every tier 3 raid is largely abandoned from groups. So finding a group for hard mode Econ is basically impossible. So 300k a week is going to be on the generous side for a lot of these players. And new players aren't going to be anywhere close to that. So maybe after a few months of farming on a new or returning account, you'll be able to bring up a couple of characters to tier 4. This is insane to me, because all content that's going to be coming out for this game in the near future is tier 4. Why are we making new players grind for months on solo content to even get the experience their first group raid, which is also a major gold source for them to be able to do more content? This is unnecessarily restrictive, and I've seen countless people try to come back to the game, but they quit when they realize the amount of work involved to catch up even a couple of characters. And that's not even to bring up a couple of characters to the most current content. I mean, they're just trying to bring them up to tier 4, to 1640. Not to mention all of the other constant hurdles that new players are forced to endure. It took me 9 months and multiple events to finish LOS 30 on my alt account, which, even with my gems, still caused me to get denied from groups constantly. The extra damage to certain monster types from the card books is basically impossible to catch up with constant additions of new cards. My alt account has 2.6% demon damage now, which is nearly 4% less damage to demons than my main account. That's a pretty noticeable difference. The tripod system. AGS gave us 2 events that I made characters on my alt account with that they didn't really give us any hope amulets for or tripods. I had to farm the tripods, and I farmed with, 8 or 9 death blades. And I didn't finish their tripods until the most recent event where they gave out more hope amulets. It was basically impossible to transfer these over. It's a rather massive damage decrease by not having level 5 tripods for a large majority of classes. There's way too many tier 3 systems that are carried over for tier 4 to be called tier 4. I've said it in the past and I'll continue to say it. This isn't a real tier 4. This is just an addition to tier 3 that has only further distanced the gap between veteran players and new players. This is the biggest problem the game faces right now, in my opinion. If the game can't retain new players, then the veterans will quit and no one else is going to be playing the game. And you can't keep whales in a dead game, because whales like to show off to noobs, and if there's no noobs, then there's no whales to stay. This is a massive lose-lose for Lost Ark when you try to cater to these whales and completely ignore the average player. And this is helping cultivate a community of players that are getting increasingly more toxic and elitist as the gap between new players and veterans widens. There's too many people that feel the need for more efficient gameplay than what the developers may intend. And I think there's a lot of factors that feed into that, like having a power gain system in the game where you don't intend for people to try and max it. It's dumb to think that players aren't going to try and max it. It's also equally stupid to know that the cost of getting there is extremely high, and players are then going to min-max all of the other systems that give them the resources to farm that. That then leads to this heavy gatekeeping that happens as people don't want to wipe in their raids and they need to keep things more efficient because they've done everything 100 times and they need to move on to the next one. This just leads to some very toxic experiences for a lot of players from making a single mistake, or just existing in a raid that someone else made a mistake in and now someone else is blowing up about it. It makes it harder for new players to just play the game or feel comfortable playing the game with more experienced players. And this is super evident with the current Makoko bootcamp movement going on. Veterans are running raids with Makokos so that they can get expert tokens. Very often, if it's a real Makoko, there isn't any actual real teaching being done. It's just trying to carry them through the raids so that we can get our tokens and we can get out. It's also now incredibly difficult to get a support for raids if you're below 1660. Because if you have a support and you can choose between running Behemoth with a full lobby of 1680s and a Makoko, or mostly 1640s with no Makoko, you're obviously going to choose the Giga Overjuiced group with a Leaf. And I'm sure some people will say that all of this is just unnecessary. You don't actually need relic books, you don't need level 8 gems, or you don't need a plus 25 weapon. And I'm not really arguing whether or not they're necessary to clear the current content. I think that if the system exists in the game, then it should be somewhat reasonable to get. And there are levels of reasonable for what you're obtaining, and factors should go into, what it's going to cost to be able to get that. But the speed of content should also be taken into account. And with these current costs, it costs 4 million gold to finish Raid Captain books, or 6 million gold for Grudge. And if you're earning about 500,000 gold a week with your 6 characters, it's going to take you 2 months to finish Raid Captain books. During that 2 months, you also need to do your karma system on all of your alts. And if your alts aren't at Brel, then you need to hone them to Brel, and then you have to do the karma system on them. Because it's a major progression system that came out with the raid, and it unlocked more of your arc passive. And this has happened several times in the past. Like it happened with Ivory Tower, for example. Ivory Tower comes out, you have to get elixirs now. And Theamine, where now you have to do Transcendence. And then Behemoth comes out, and you have to do Weapon Transcendence. And Akenda comes out, and you have to do Advanced Honing. And for many players, you have to sacrifice your ability to progress in one area to complete the new progression system that comes out with the new raid, or you can't do the new stuff until you've completed the progression system that was there, that you've been trying to catch up on this entire time. And for many people, they won't have a single relic book completed by the time the next raid comes out, which they're then going to be needing to spend their gold on a different progression system, just like honing to be able to do it. So when the speed of the content coming out isn't really proportionate to the income being generated to afford these systems, I don't really find it personally reasonable to finish it. So I'd ask, what's the point of having the system if the majority of players aren't ever going to be able to afford it? And I think almost everyone would say it's because they want you to spend more money on the game, which is probably true. However, they aren't dealing with the RMT problem, so while people are spending more money on the game, they're not giving it to AGS or Smilegate, they're giving it to bot farmers on G2G. So what's the solution to all of this? There's going to have to be some dramatic changes to the actual game design for the game to continue. And if new players are constantly getting flushed out of the game and there's no retention on them, then the game can't grow and people will just inevitably quit, which will cause the game to die. Personally, I think there needs to be a real tier 4 with an actual reset, something that's friendly to bring new people back in. With the reset, I would want to see new content to exist that can run parallel to raiding. Not everyone wants to raid in a full group all of the time. Maybe having a dungeon alternative like WoW has. I know the Mythic Plus system has been brought up before. I think that Mythic Plus would have some difficulties in Lost Ark in its current state if it was just a 1-for-1. It would obviously have to be expanded upon or adapted into Lost Ark, but the idea of having content that can run parallel to raiding, where you don't necessarily need to be raiding but can still progress your character, is something that could be a great addition into the game. And I think this is something that could really be expanded on quite a bit. And I think this would need to come with some sort of restriction or limitation on rewards. I would really have to spend more time thinking about the actual system, and I would love to know your guys' ideas on how the system could be expanded on even more. But I think it would have to be something that feels optional but still adds value to current progression systems. And maybe it could be expanded on so that it helps new players. Like maybe you can do like an upgraded Kai Angle or like an upgraded Ivory Tower as like a solo mode option that's harder than hard mode, and you get a pass that gives you like an extra 10 item levels, or it boots you up to the next raid so that you don't have to grind out weeks and weeks of mats to try and catch back up. This is just a 5-minute idea while I'm thinking about it and recording the video, but I'm sure this system could be expanded on a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other people have ideas. I'd love to know what they are. I also think that there has to be a dramatic increase in supply in gems, relic books, mats, everything. The amount of time that it's taking to farm any individual one of these is exceeding entire content patches for most players. That means that most players will never finish these systems because they'll be constantly working on the new system that comes out. And so what's happening is people are realizing that they need to farm more gold. And it again is cultivating this entire, all of these issues. You know, people are running more buses, people are resorting to RMT, they're making more accounts so that they can farm more gold and do more dailies. And I may be wrong here, but I would bet that if you allowed bus advertisement in Party Finder, but the cost of everything was halved, then there would be a much more reasonable ratio of buses to normal runs in Party Finder. I bet people wouldn't be playing 5 or 6 accounts if they could afford things reasonably just playing one. So I think something has to change, and I don't think it's going to be how the community is playing the game when the game is designed like this. So I would love to see, at least in the short term, a massive supply increase on relic books or gems. Ultimately, I would love to see at a minimum an increase in supply on these items to help cut some of the cost out. An increase in supply brings price down, but long term there has to be some sort of additional content in this game outside of just raids and grind to the next item level requirement, with no reset in between or way for people to catch up. If new players aren't being greeted into the game and they're realizing how much work they have to do just to catch up, they just get filtered out and they quit. But let me know what you guys think though. Comment down below on the state of the game. Are you guys enjoying the grind? How are you guys playing the game? Are you bussing like crazy so that you can afford all of your level 10 gems? I'd love to know your opinions, possibly do a further in-depth dive into some of these larger overarching problems that exist in the game, and go a little bit more in detail into, you know, some of my perspective on how I was able to actually do this, because this was not reasonable. This grind was not reasonable. And by the way, I spent 6 million gold on my 25 weapon after I spent 4 million gold hitting 24 at 96%. So I would say that, you know, things could change. Things could change.